I will just quickly introduce myself and then have our panelists introduce themselves. My name is Mercy Eriawarian Susu, and I'm Intensives Manager at Halcyon, which is a social impact incubator with a mission to accelerate the impact-driven future of business. I'm excited to be joined by a prestigious panel of individuals, both in person and online, and I will have them introduce themselves shortly. So I think perhaps we can start with Dr. Valentine Obi, who is joining us via Zoom.
Okay. Well, my name is Valentine Obi, and I have a history of innovation. Hello. I have a history of innovation and significant entrepreneurial contribution in the digital technology space in Africa. In 2003, I founded eTransact to basically solve the cash-based problems that we had in Nigeria and we still have. And eTransact went on to become the first mobile banking and payment app on the App Store in 2008. We're currently in about 8 countries in Africa and also the United Kingdom. 2021 also very interesting for us because it was also a time I founded Kiara. Kiara basically is a platform set up to solve the funding challenges, in the factoring business, meaning it will help SMEs to get needed funding for their projects across Africa, not just in their own country. It also helps investors, provide them an avenue to find and fund attractive investments. My passion also in that technology have led me into co-founding a digital bank in the UK called Excel. And the whole idea is basically to solve the problem, reduce the cost of transactions for users and merchants alike. Interestingly, Excel, do more transactions today compared to eTransact, but it's quite interesting. And lastly, just about last year, August, we developed an app for the Ghana government called the SIMREG to basically help, in the whole idea for SIMREG is to help the government of Ghana provide a convenient and cost-effective way, to register, SIMs in the country. This is interesting because it helps, uses both AI, ID checks. For the first time, you're using fingerprint on both iOS and Android in a way that truly helps the whole process go smoothly. So I've been a lot more in digital technology, for most part of my life. But more importantly, I'm a Christian who happens to be in business, and I'm a pastor with the Living Faith Church. And that's me. Thank you, guys.
So much. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is Chika Mobi. I'm the founder and CEO of Decagon. I started Decagon 5 years ago, really to help Nigerians, and now division expanded to Black people globally to launch and grow careers in tech. We're now the largest trainers or producers of software engineering talent in Nigeria. We created the first student loan, so merit-based financing facility that allows really smart people to come into our program, live in our campus, get trained, and we help them get a job when they get done. And they don't have to pay anything up front. They can just access credit based on their intellect. Before that, I was spent a decade doing early stage investing and venture building. Built or helped build companies like Jobberman, which I was the first investor and interim CEO for the first year. Checky, which is the cars.com of Africa, now called AutoCheck, which we exited, and a bunch of other startups. where we're investing investing our own money, but then eventually also became a partner in a VC firm. And before that, I spent my the decade before that building out my first company. I'd gone to college and I moved back to Nigeria in 2001, a year after graduating, to start a company called MTech. And the purpose there was to make internet and mobile phones available. And so we partnered with MTN Nigeria to build out the first mobile internet service in Nigeria, and went on to play a pioneering role in the value-added service industry across Africa. So been in a sense a contemporary of Dr. Val and Ehi here.
Thank you, Ehi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ehi. I am the outgoing CEO at Bridge and founder of quite a few ventures. Bridge is a company which enables frictionless trade across Africa. We work with lots of big fintechs and banks in enabling settlement across the continent in local currencies. Today, we are in 34 markets across Africa and growing. And our ambition is to make it possible one day to enable seamless, frictionless transactions across the continent. Prior to Bridge, I have created, I'm a venture builder actively. I think I enjoy the startup phase of a company. And my previous company, we sold to Intel. Active in, worked very closely with Google and a number of other companies in their scale up out of North America into the rest of Africa. I'm CEO at ClearSpace Labs, which is one of 3 privately funded deep tech venture builders located on the continent, which is doing amazing work in the AI space and building out and creating new ventures. I tend to think that one of the old guard who's looking at other amazing entrepreneurs like Chika, who I raise my hat to, and Valentine, who I met in my Rankard days, wearing that hat, and just celebrating all the exceptionalism from Africa I see around me. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ehime Egbe, founder of Sweet Kiwi. Sweet Kiwi is an artisan creamery that started in Nigeria. We started as a frozen yogurt company, making the best quality frozen yogurt out of my personal need to eat better and change my diet after I was diagnosed with a uterine fibroid. I created this product in Dallas, Texas, and decided to move to Nigeria to start up a frozen yogurt shop. Fast forward 12 years later, we became one of the biggest frozen yogurt companies in Nigeria, and then expanded to the US and are now in over 2,000 doors. Well, going to be 3,000 doors next month. And we can be found in Walmart, Kroger, Whole Foods, Giant, and several independent grocery stores across the country. Just excited to be here to learn from a lot of my bonds here. Well, if you don't know what that means my seniors here. And just to continue growing an exceptional African food company who's been able to cross over into a different market. And, you know, we're just really passionate about the food industry and pushing for equity in the industry. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Usman Isiaka, the Deputy CEO of UBA America. I bring you warm greetings from the CEO, Shola Yomi Ajayi, who has been here on several occasions. I'm sure many of you will have been looking forward to meeting her because she has been here at different points in time. United Bank for Africa America is the only sub-Saharan African bank with presence with an operating license in the United States. And we have been in this country since 1984. It means we are close to 50 years old in America. UBA America is a member, a branch operation of UBA Group in Nigeria. UBA is also a 73 years old financial institution, a Pan-African global bank with presence in 20 African countries and 4 international operations. We're in America, of course. We're in London. We're in Paris. And we just recently opened our Dubai office. We are a well-diversified financial institution focusing on Africa. In fact, I'm excited by the theme of this session, which is Africa is the future. How do we harness the opportunity to create a prosperous continent for ourselves? Because Africa is our home. We know the business landscape, the regulatory environment in Africa, and we are using our position as Africa's global bank to facilitate the flow of investment capital and development capital, as well as trade flow between Africa and the rest of the world. We are passionate also about the startup business because we believe that government as an institution cannot be the sole employer of laborers. The SME sector is, which is an integral, for which the startup constitute an integral part of, is the biggest segment of any economy. So if you have a very active startup and SME field, then it will quickly facilitate the development of the continent. And to that extent, we are involved in various initiatives as a bank to promote the development of startup and the SME field segment in general. Specifically, we are not just looking at it from point of view of financing alone. We start first of all from the perspective of capacity building, which is the most important thing that the startup needs. Okay, we also facilitate business registration services. We provide funding in form of also short-term and medium-term funding for the startup, and we also support. In fact, UBA built the biggest platform, which we call the UBA Marketplace, where we encourage SME and startup to be able to host their product on the UBA Marketplace in order to have access to buyers across the globe. We are also partnering with various development institutions like the African Exim Bank, African Development Bank, and various NGOs to facilitate and the provision of the low-cost single-digit funding that the startup and SME segment needs for them to be able to develop their business ideas. So it is my pleasure to be here to share some of those initiatives in more detail on how we support the startup business across the continent.
Thank you.
Of Africa.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to just jump right into our questions. And I want to start first with the emerging sectors and industries. This question is for Val and for Usman. Can you tell us about which sectors and industries startups are disrupting in Africa, and what opportunities do you envision or do you see that these present for growth and innovation? I guess we can start with Val since you just spoke.
Okay, well, let me just start from there. Right. In terms of which sector, of course, the technology sector is a major driver of startup business across Africa. And we also have to eat the fact that the African continent has the biggest, has the largest population of young people across the entire world. So it provides an opportunity for us to be able to have significant amount of young entrepreneurs that will come up with business ideas that can drive the development of the continent. The technological advancement also is a major driver of startup across Africa. And it's actually an area that has significant opportunity because you still have a lot of process improvement and optimization opportunity in various things that we do, starting like in the area of different banking services, there are a lot of payment solutions that can be developed in order to improve and facilitate the financial inclusion objective that most governments are driving. There is an opportunity to also automate several processes that are still manual in the government businesses, in the area of business registration, in the area of land registration, and several other areas. So the technology advancement is an opportunity for us to actually improve the development of the continent through this startup. And a major driver also for this is the fact that the continent generally has witnessed a major development in the area of mobile technology. So the mobile technology space is a major driver of the startup business across the continent. And you can see how this is facilitating payment across the continent. You hear about the M-Pesa in Kenya, in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, we have also been a CEO. Several payment solutions have been developed with a view to enhancing the payment system across the continent. So the technology space is a major driver that can be used to facilitate the growth of the African continent and creating prosperity for all.
Thank you. Val, can you have a few words?
Yes, I do agree with him. I think the technology space has been doing quite well. Like Usman said, in the area of banking and payment, there is no doubt that there's been quite a lot of disruption in that arena across Africa. Some of the stuff that you see in Africa, even starting in Nigeria and then into Ghana, you see, for example, instantaneous payment, which you can't even get today, even at that speed, even in America or also in the United Kingdom. So that space has been very active. There's a lot of mobile technology, mobile payment platforms that already exist, so that is working. But also what we're also seeing, if you look at what my colleague just talked about, the frozen yogurt. I mean, that is an innovative thing, and it's taken off. We have other people, especially in the agribusiness and also in the food industry, whereby they're looking at from farm to table, and that is taken off quite very well. And this is actually disrupting the chain, whereby you have the big conglomerates that have to warehouse the products, and then a lot of agents and distributors coming in and to take those products. But now, with some of these young companies that have just started, it simply means that they have a relationship with farmers, and they move the product from there straight to the restaurants, which is very innovative, and it's fantastic. So we're going to see a lot more of that. We're talking about the AI. AI is going to be something that is going to be really needed in Africa, simply because we don't have so much infrastructure to really do a lot of things. But AI can help us in many ways. And some of the products and some of the technology we see coming out, those are things that I believe would truly disrupt what is currently traditional. That is just a few things I can say about that now.
Thank you both. Ehi and Chika, can you maybe add to what they've just said and speak to the trends, speak a little bit further to the trends and drivers of entrepreneurship and innovation, and how it's impacting the business landscape? But I'd also like to hear from your personal experience, the trends that you were seeing that caused you to enter into your respective businesses and ventures that you launched.
If we hear him, say the more handsome person should go first. Why are you laughing? So, yeah, I think trends-wise, I think obviously in Africa, in Nigeria, in Africa, mobile, internet, mobile and internet is way more widespread. It's critical mass. When we used to invest, we looked at, like, when I was part of the VC firm, we looked at like how the number of unicorns in a country really takes off after they cross 50 million internet users. So America, China, Latin American countries, like they would be like one every 5 years or whatever, 1 every 2 years. And then after they cross 50 million, you just see a whole bunch of unicorns emerge. And that critical mass of people that are connected makes it attractive for capital and also for talent. Just speaking from my personal experience, I started very early as a founder, but then as an investor, very early, trying to seed, almost a decade ago, and do acceleration programs and all that stuff. And at the time, it was very difficult to find exceptional people doing startups because there was not a lot of successes. And so it was really a few crazy people like me and Ehi and the Jobberman guys, right, that were what I think are top quality. And then it was just other reckless people. But the most brilliant people like went and got jobs at UBA or McKinsey or investment banking or whatever, or PNG and all that stuff. But now, and I think this is the most important, for me, I think the most important driver of the growth of the startup ecosystem is that now some of the most brilliant people, many of the most brilliant people aspire to do startups, are doing startups, have done startups, have failed at startups, having worked at startups and seen their bosses who they are smarter than, or who they believe they're smarter than, do well. And they think, I can do this. This guy's making so many mistakes. So that's, I think, really fueled a wave. And I think a lot more is coming in the future. It's also now easier, like a lot of the rails, things that the payments, there's a bunch of things that every founder would have had to figure out in their business stack, that now there's like a lot of APIs and there's a lot of infrastructure, and you can really focus in on the customer problem. And then of course, capital. A lot of, like, Africa is on the map, even though now it has reduced, but generally speaking, Africa is on the map. African founders are in every accelerator program. So it's very exciting times.
Awesome.
Thanks, Chika. So now that the older ones have spoken, the more handsome ones can speak as well. But yes, I think amazing insights from there. Risk capital in Africa has been a real, really lit a fire on entrepreneurship as a career. Before, it was only people who couldn't get jobs who ended up being entrepreneurs, otherwise known as hustlers. And you just basically had to eke everything out to earn a living. And but there have been major trends which have fueled the growth of Africa's entrepreneurial ecosystem. And at each point of a major technology tailwind has given birth to a new rise of entrepreneurs. So first there was the digitization time. And I think there were those guys, especially like in Nigeria and across Africa, who went in and digitized banking systems sort of as the first wave. And then there were the communication guys who came in and brought the network infrastructure, laid that. Then there were the internet guys who brought connectivity to that network. And then there were the services and the software guys like myself and Chika, who layered on services with that and had sort of the first big exits in Africa at the time, and delivered a whole range of services. And then there's been several others, the e-commerce guys, who sort of came in and helped fuel that internet revolution in Africa. But e-commerce, just a slight segue of that, e-commerce was very hard. It's very hard because anybody who was doing e-commerce maybe about 10 years ago had to basically fight 4 or 5 industries at the same time. You had to figure out internet, you had to figure out devices, you had to figure out logistics, you had to figure out payments, and then you had to figure out operations and service delivery before you started even discussing your product itself. So as each of the major technology innovation and infrastructure has come through. It's created a whole new set of entrepreneurs who have risen from that. And personally, as we run a deep tech venture firm, one of the areas I think is waiting for massive disruption is the use of AI, and not in the way which people think about it. The reason why AI, I think, is going to be very powerful is that it's an amplifier of talent and skill. So if you take that, for example, if you look like a doctor or a lawyer as a profession, and it takes traditionally today 14 to 15 years to create or teach or empower a doctor. And a few years down the line, you have technology which can produce a doctor in 4 months, 3 months, 2 months. There's a significant amplification of productivity and power in many spheres. So whether it's engineering, it's military, it's banking, it's creative industries. I think the potential to amplify productivity with AI is going to be a big dominant change of creating winners in the marketplace in Africa. And the trick, I think, is entrepreneurs who can match that productivity creation with the opportunities and the inefficiencies which exist in the market space today, and how those matches and that vision is going to create, I think, significant billionaires in the next wave. I think each wave has gotten better. The early days, we used to look forward to seeing the African billionaire exits. Now we're seeing that. And I think AI has the potential really to create some massive winners on the continent.
Thank you. I think it's good to highlight and underscore that since both you and Val discussed AI, so I think maybe the next forum, that should be a conversation that we have about the next AI ventures that are coming out of the continent. I want to turn to Ehime, if I may. Can you tell us, since everyone here is a entrepreneur and or a serial entrepreneur, but can you maybe highlight some of the challenges that you experienced in growing your startup? And also, I think I would also like to maybe, I don't know if you all would agree with me, but I've noticed that there is a trend that a lot of entrepreneurs on the continent are homegrown diasporans who've also gone back. And Ehime, you're an example of that as well. So maybe if you can just tell us what were some of the challenges that you had just launching in Nigeria?
I would say my major challenge was understanding the way business was done in the country. So I have this great idea. I want to open stores in Dallas, and then I go to Nigeria for my brother's wedding. And the whole time I was there, all I saw was a gap, because every event that we went to, every time it was time to eat, they would just bring out plates of jollof rice. And it didn't have any greens. There was nothing healthy. And at some point, I remember my cousin who had never been to Nigeria crying, and I thought something had happened to her, and I was like, hey, what was wrong? And she's like, I just can't eat another plate of rice. And, and it just kept calling to me that this was a place that needed an intervention in how people ate and how people experienced food. And so I said I was gonna go back. Everyone told me like, oh, you can't survive Nigeria. Like you're too polite, you're too fragile. But I said I was gonna try anyway, because it was just an idea that I couldn't get out of my head. So I remember my first day trying to do business in Nigeria was probably, I woke up in the morning, we're signed up for all these markets to go try out the product, sell the product. That was the day that the Lekki toll had opened up. And I was in traffic for 5 hours in the same spot. And the first market had already closed, and still took me another 3 hours to get to that market, only to get there and find out that was closed. So I'm rushing back to the island for the next market to get there and find out that was closed too. And I remember going home feeling like I was a failure and crying myself to sleep and thinking if I was gonna call Delta the next day to change my ticket, because I don't think I can do this. But I just kept working through the challenges. I think you just have to stay in it. A lot of the challenges I noticed is access to even just bare amenities like power. We have a frozen product, a product that needed to be refrigerated or frozen all the time, there's basically no infrastructure for that. Even water, like I don't know, our company in Nigeria actually buys water. We buy like the water that we use in our product, because if you don't do that, there's a high risk that the product is contaminated. So there's a lot of those challenges that we've had to figure out every step of the way. Even just settling into the country, but through those challenges, what I discovered were new opportunities. So I was going to set up a storefront in a country where I didn't know anyone, except for my immediate family. But because I wasn't able to do that, because at the time, if you wanted to rent a shop space in Nigeria, you needed 5 years rent. And you needed to pay this crazy amount of money. I just took out my 401k. I haven't been working that long. And it was just impossible. So instead, one day we were doing samples and someone said to me, hey, would you consider catering my wedding? I really like the product. And I was like, oh, we could do that. And we started doing that. We became like a really big dessert company for weddings, events. And then we started going after the corporates. But what that allowed us to do was, first of all, start saving to be able to afford our own place. But also, what I realized later on after we launched our first store was that it built up a pipeline of customers that had experienced the product, known the brand, and we were already a known brand, a trustworthy brand. So I remember the day we opened our first store, we literally blocked out the whole of the street because people already knew us. They've experienced us at so many catering events that we've done for 3 years. So that's what I mean by a lot of times there were hindrances, but out of those things also came opportunities that helped the brand become what it is today. You know, I can go into the funding aspect of it as well. Not being able to raise funding. Once again, it was a challenge, but we also had creative ways that we used to raise money and get our own space. We kept doing catering. We kept, drumming up a lot of revenues through those avenues and coming up with innovative ways to do those things. But the challenges for startups in Nigeria are quite real. I feel like launching in the US, it just gave me a completely different perspective of what it was to launch a startup. I remember when we were first going to launch in our first retailer, Whole Foods, I hadn't done anything in a week outside of deliver the product 2 weeks ago. So I kept calling them and I kept calling. I was like, what do I have to do? I just feel like I'm not doing anything. And they're like, it's fine. It's just going to be in the store. And I was like, no, but I'm not used to this. I'm used to being sick, being traumatized, calling the person who's supposed to put up the signage, just being stressed out till I was ill every time I'm about to launch something. So I was just it just feels weird that I'm calm and chilling and watching TV and this big thing is about to happen. And I realized man, this is Nigerian trauma, and those are the things, those are challenges. And I'm really, really passionate about trying to see how we can make that better for the companies that are coming after us.
Thank you so much. We are running out of time, so I just want to apologize because I think we won't be able to take any questions. And also for the same reason, I'm going to ask my last 2 questions and give you guys a jam assignment, as the panelists yesterday mentioned. Yeah. So here's your assignment, okay? You have to respond in no more than 5 words. Okay, here we go. So what do you all think needs to be done to overcome the current roadblocks in policy and regulatory reform to create a more enabling environment on the continent? I know it's an essay. I know it's an essay. But we discussed the trends, and we all know that, and the trends, the trend in AI, for example, what would need to be overcome in order for that to be a solid reality and to help, the continent, leapfrog, I hate to use that word, other continents? What would need to happen? So you have 5 words or less. We'll start with Dr. Val. Let's see if you can do it.
Well, 5 words, that's really difficult, but I'll give my best. 1, we leapfrogged in payment in Africa. We moved from the traditional stuff to mobile, and it works, and it's still working.
Dr. Val, sorry, you're about to fail the assignment. So give me your top 5 words.
Well, first, I think regulation.
Okay.
Our regulators need to be properly schooled in a different aspect. That's one. I have 2 more words of them. I don't know how to do this. Okay, well.
Should we just leave it as a regulation?
Regulation is important because, yes, in my field, regulation seems to play quite a big role. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Val. Chika.
More capital, more helpfulness, cooperation. More talent.
Okay. Talent, capital, corporation, regulation. You're up next.
Engaged regulator.
3? 3 left. Yeah, 3.
Write the regulation.
Love it. No, they're tweetable. Anyway.
I would say engaging more economists in the government. So people who understand the impact of a small business in government, because I think that that's where the disconnect is. I'm sorry, I already failed. I might as well keep going. If they don't understand it, then they don't understand. If they don't understand the impact, everything else that my panelists said doesn't matter.
I say access to funding, capacity development, infrastructural development.
Thank you all. So last question. Now, your history is like 20, 30 years. You all have very deep experience in this field. So looking back and looking into the future, let's look down 10, 20 years, okay? What do you envision will be the landscape of entrepreneurship on the continent? And what do you think will be the trend then? And where do you see the growth occurring? You may have 10 to 15 words. A sentence.
I have to catch a flight, so I want to go first.
Yes, please.
If you don't mind, excuse me. This is prescriptive. Not so much necessarily what I see, but what I want to see. I want to see diaspora in America solve American problems, not African problems. Let the Africans in Africa solve African problems. I'm sure that not everybody would agree, but the United States is the biggest startup and venture. It has the most liquidity. It's producing the most billionaires. The analogy I have is if you're Nigeria, is the Lagos of Nigeria. And Africans are underrepresented in getting a piece of this global opportunity. And part of the reason is because when Ehime goes to Nigeria, she sees so many gaps that she thinks she should focus on that. But I think that for the benefit of Africa, that if we produce more successful founders, successful billionaires of diaspora here, it will be transformational for the continent in terms of capital, in terms of mentorship, in terms of, in so many ways. And so 30 years in this, my future that I'm seeing, 30 years, we have, if you think about, we are 20% of the world. We have, between 10 and 20% of CEOs or founders of the biggest companies in the world are of African descent. That's the future that I want to see.
Thanks, Chika. Very bold. Yeah, running away. So I share many of Chika's perspectives, but with a slight twist. 30 years from now, I'd like to see Africa as a hotbed of global innovation, not necessarily focusing on African problems, but Africans solving global problems. I think the productivity and the wealth of the continent is tied to how effective the continent would be at playing on a global scale. And the inefficiencies we find in Africa should only be the bedrock to launch us onto a global stage as global players. So I think we have to move beyond solving third world problems specifically to begin to think, why is the next Tesla not emerging from Africa? Why isn't the next drone company or Third Eye, or why the next set of really hot innovations in anything, in material sciences, in AI, why is that not emerging from a truly capable African talent pool? And I think that as our innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems mature, it'd be great to see 30 years from now that African companies have developed a niche as true hotbed of entrepreneurial and innovation exceptionalism globally.
Awesome, thank you.
I agree as well. But I feel like in 20 years, I want to see African founders, especially in the food space, I want to see less barriers, more entries into more markets. So for example, you launch a product in Nigeria, you should be global on day one. I think we're already moving towards being global citizens and less being a citizen of one country. And I feel like in 20 years, that's what we're going to be seeing, Africa really taking back ownership of its food systems, where they're fairer and more equitable food systems for everyone, where the farmer in Nigeria that's growing the cashews has someone in Nigeria that's processing the cashews and they're reaping the actual benefits of their hard work and not having to go around the world to get to the US. So that way more money is going to Africa and less aid.
Love it. Thank you.
Well, in the next 20 years, what I see is an opportunity for an improved funding access to fund to start up. It's a major challenge. But let me come from perspective of a commercial bank. The commercial bank are highly regulated, and their funding most often cannot support the startup business, which comes with a lot of risk. So there should be a partnership between commercial bank working with government to be able to create funds, just as we have in Nigeria, the agricultural business SME fund, so that the startup and SME can access those funds. We have example also in Sierra Leone. They have the Munafa Fund. UBA actually partner with the government of Sierra Leone to make that funding available at a single-digit interest rate, so that it will support the startup business as well as the SME business to grow. Okay. I also see an opportunity for increased regulatory reforms, so that it will enable to create an enabling environment for the startup to be able to grow. It makes business registration as simple as business registration. If you have tried to register a company in some countries, it tells you that it's a whole lot of bottlenecks. So that regulatory reform needs to happen. So I see that happening in the years to come. I also see a huge opportunity in terms of the expansion of the African market. We are already seeing the barrier being broken with the Pan-African approach, with the African Continental Free Trade Area, where you can easily move goods from one country to another country without paying tariff. So the startup and the SME, the business entrepreneurs, will like to take advantage of that by extending the market for their products across the continent of Africa. The market is huge. The opportunities are there. I see us being able to explore that with time. The Pan-African focus, and also I also see the need for the immigration laws to also be changed across the continent, so that it also facilitates the movement of people across the different countries in Africa. When that happens, clearly there'll be a major shift in the development trend for Africa.
Thank you.
Right.
Lastly, Dr. Val, just very briefly.
Yes, for me, the next thing is I want to see an Africa that is one. Today, Africa is hugely divided. It interests you to know that if, for example, a human tries to market her product in Ghana or somewhere else in Africa, there'll be huge challenges. Africa, there's a lot of division amongst the Africans. The Ghanaians don't trust the Nigerians. The Nigerians don't trust the Ghanaians. And there's big division. So we're not taking advantage of that single market we think we wanted to do. That is a big challenge in Africa. So we are actually talk about Pan-Africanism, about all that, but in truth, it is not working as it should. So you don't truly have one Africa as we speak. And if you look at it, look at even the travel, to go from Nigeria to Kenya, for example, you still need a visa. To go to South Africa from Ghana to South Africa, you need a visa and vice versa. So things are really closed. So we need to see that really happen, so that immigration across Africa can become just like what they have in Europe. That way we can actually strengthen Africa a lot. Talking about the African trade zone, the African Free Trade Zone, is also a big challenge. Today, the biggest challenge is even the network of payment, making payment between one African country to the other. And that's a challenge. Now, because Afrexim Bank has set up what they call PAPs, yet we find out that the COMESA or the SADC region never wants to be part of it. And also, those also in East Africa is no. So you see the West Africans embrace PAPs and all that, meanwhile the rest don't. So there is a need to have truly a one Africa for us to take advantage of our size and take advantage of our culture, and I think that is not happening. If we do that, then Africa becomes really a very big market that the world will go for. There is no doubt we have the talents, we have we have the talents, and even capital you can raise from one African country to the other. You can actually use capital amongst each other, but then we're not even taking advantage of that. And that is, for me, one thing that we need to do if we're talking about the whole of Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Val.
Thank you.
And thank you all. I think I will have no closing remarks. I think our panelists have said it all and said it very well.